Alright. Welcome back dito sa latest episode ng Deep Dive, guys. Marami tayong pag-usapan. Or maybe not. Baka late na rin. No, but sabi ko, ihabol ko ito bago na naman babalik na naman sa mga daming mga world developments na kino-cover natin, including the ongoing nuclear talks in Geneva. Obviously, I think it's in the interest of all of us frontline allies, all of us who are at the potentially within the range of bullying and predation of authoritarian superpowers. We have an interest in making sure na unang-una walang malaking gera mangyari sa gitnang silangan, kung saan of course million sa ating mga kababayan nandyan, especially sa Persian Gulf region. Obviously may interest din tayo na hindi ma-bog down yung mga allies at kaibigan natin, because that will prevent them from being basically capable of supporting us, not to mention baka ma-encourage pa yung mga ibang superpowers. Malamang pag-focus dito, wala na masyado sa Ukraine, wala na masyado sa Taiwan, may limitasyon din ng kahit Amerika. Last year dun sa limited 12-day war pa lang, US had to dispense with 1/4 of its entire THAAD missile interceptors, no? So 11 days pa lang na limited war, at taga-depensa lang ang US, ubus kagad yung quarter ng total high-end interceptors nila. So in short, we have to look at developments all around the world because we have a direct interest, not to mention as human beings, we have an interest in making sure, or at least caring about not more people and more states being broken apart, and more people suffering because of delusions and sense of grandeur, or false information, disinformation, or paranoia, or whatnot, right? So let's hope diplomacy works, and a diplomacy that works for everyone, right, in the interest of the region, and interest of all the key parties, as difficult as that seems. Now, balikan natin ang Pilipinas, because I always identified with what some call as progressive realism, right? So basically, meron kang idea ng a more just world, meron kang idea ng anong maganda para sa inyong bansa, para sa mundo, anong mga ayaw mo. Ayaw mo ng injustice, ayaw mo ng EJK, ayaw mo ng trapo, ayaw mo ng tabbad, right? Klarong-klaro ka about your goals and your convictions, no? But at the same time, dapat realistic ka rin. Because there's balance of power, there are material realities, there is a certain structure of reality that you have to deal with. Kumbaga, you have to change the world, but first you have to take the world as it is, not based on your imagination or delusions or denial. No, so as a progressive realist, you can see that my interventions on West Philippine Sea, on different conflicts around the world, is very much driven by the need for balance of power. Kaya kailangan natin ng suporta ng Amerika, kaibigan natin, para naman hindi tayo mabully. Because if it's just one-on-one with us and China, alam natin sa mapunta yan. At the same time, of course, we have to be progressive. Meaning, hindi naman tayo pwede na, depende lang sa mga ibang bansa to provide our national security. Otherwise, we're not a self-respecting, truly sovereign country. And we're not in a sense that we outsource a lot of our national security needs to the US over the years and decades, pero sana naman at some point ayusin natin yan. Now, that kind of progressive realism is something that I want to also discuss on the domestic level. And let me immediately start by saying, shame on you, yung mga ka-DDS, ang kakapal ng mukha nyo. In 2016, despite our repeated warnings na you don't want the Marcoses to come back to power, sinuportahan yung mga Marcoses. Ang kakapal ng mukha nyo, when Digong basically glorified yung ating dating diktador by putting him dun sa libingan ng mga bayani, ang kakapal ng mukha nyo, sinuportahan nyo yan. Shame on you. So you have been part and parcel, in fact, central to the whole disinformation campaign that made the Marcoses basically na-rehabilitate sila politically and brought them back. As if that weren't enough, all the way to 2022, you question Leni Robredo's victory. Binastos niyo si Leni Robredo, at marami sa inyo, mga ka-DDS, ay tinawag si BBM as the true vice president. And you supported BBM's continuous and of course repeatedly failed attempts at overturning the election results of 2016. Ang kakapal ng mukha nyo. And then 2022, you went the next level. Sinuportahan nyo not only the vice presidential, although failed vice presidential bid of BBM, sinuportahan nyo si BBM as president. right? Now, alam ko may mga ibang DDS yan na bitter dahil hindi si Sara ang ano, pero Diyos ko naman pag ay naku. Anyway, you really think Sara had, like was ready to be presidential? And anyway, I don't want to go there, but I was there at Comelec when Sara Duterte made it final na she's only running for the vice presidency. And naalala ko may mga ka-DDS dyan, atin dyan na ayaw maniwala, gusto pa rin niya. But nevertheless, at the end of the day, even in spite of Tatay Digong's warning, you still supported BBM as part of the unit team. And then, after all these years, noon pa lang na hindi niyo nakuha yung gusto niyo, biglang na-realize niyo na naisahan kayo ng mga Marcoses. Na-realize niyo na medyo tabat yung strategy niyo. Biglang ngayon nagmamalinis kayo. Biglang ngayon people power mode. Biglang ngayon, paano diktador? Tapos ang kakapal ng mukha niyo, tatawagin niyo pa yung iba, kain suka, whatever yung mga ganun. Ang kakapal ng mukha niyo. I think it's very important for people to constantly remind everyone what the DDS has done for the past decade and more in terms of helping the Marcoses to directly come back to power. So meron kayong zero credibility to say anything about it. Now, as a progressive realist, anong position natin dito? Of course, nangyari ang nangyari. Thanks to DDS, nakabalik ang Marcoses, nandito na tayo. And thanks to DDS, tignan mo naman yung vice-presidente natin, and even more interesting iteration. So basically, you had Nepo kids, occupying number 1 and number 2 positions, and then nagtataka tayo, baka tayo dumating sa ganitong situation. Tapos ngayon, eto pa, as if that's not enough. Anong sinabi nyo nung nag-chummy-chummy si Sara and Amy Marcos? And now, actually, openly, Amy Marcos is positioning to be the vice president of Sara Duterte. And anong sinabi niya ulit dyan? Anong sinasabi niya kay Amy? Anong sinasabi niya sa decision ni Sara to potentially team up with Amy? So, ang kakapal ng mukha niyo. Ayusin niyo yung sarili niyo. But this is what I'm saying, guys. You cannot be nice. You cannot be always conciliatory. I think even si Ma'am Leni, natanggap niya na may limitasyon na itong, conciliatory politics. You have to call it out. Don't leave the battlefield to the enemy, especially yung mga worst of the worst type of people, right? Who engage in disinformation, zero self-awareness, ang kakapal ng mukha. So, I'm sorry, no, you have zero credibility to talk about good governance dahil sa panahon ni Digong, nangyaring Farmali, nangyaring lahat ng mga flood control projects, naging big time Ligaya, mga Diskaya, all the evidence is there. No, I'm not even gonna go to the West Philippine Sea and yung mga kababain na ginagawa ng katabadan na pang barangay geopolitics ang ginawa ni Digong, and all sorts of other crazy stuff he did. Not to mention, of course, the extrajudicial killings and other things that has basically tuloy naging karton na. And just as we said, mga ka-DDS, hindi lang si Digong ang nasaan si Bato ngayon? Last time I check, natanggalan lang lahat ng position si Bato. Bakit sinasahot pa ba yan si Bato na yan? Magpakita ka na, para maano ka naman, para magsama na kayo ni Digong. Nilalagay din namin ng para papakain namin yan. Anyways, and then yung isa pang factotum ni Digong, talagang kapal ng mukha ng mga to. Meron pa siyang due process. For 6, 7, 8 years, ilang years, wala kayong sinabi sa EJK, which is exactly the opposite of due process. And then ngayon na yayarin na kayo ng ICC and mga opisyalis, biglang, kailangan natin ng due process, kailangan ganun. Yan ang sinasabi ko. Zero credibility, ang kakapal ng mukha. And that's why, guys, hindi tayo pwede tahimik lang. Alright, now, progressive realist. Progressive meaning, neither team kadiliman, nor team kasamaan. Realist means, things are the way they are, so you have to deal with it. You have to improve from where you are. How do you go from point A to point B? That's what progressive realists are going to think about. Not pretend we're not in point A. Imagine a point Z and then you want to go to Z squared. No, that doesn't work. What is the point A? How do you go to point B? So, ano yung point B natin? Anong destination natin kung progressive tayo? Of course, ang destination natin, yung hindi kurakot na presidente. Competent na presidente. Maayos, best and brightest, ang kabinete, right? And then sana may partido, may kilusan, maayos lahat para naman talaga comprehensive yung reforma sa ating gobyerno. So klarong-klaro tayo, guys, dito sa ano yung end goal natin. yun yung klaseng presidente at administrasyon na kailangan natin sa susunod na election cycle. We should be clear about that. No EJKs, no pandering to superpowers, no tuta politics, no tabad geopolitics, no tiki-toki, tik. Alam niyo na, di ba? And of course, walang formali, walang flood control, walang mga kalokohan, and lahat ng mga kababalagan na nakita natin over the past 10 years. All right, so let's be absolutely clear about the facts of the case here. All right, let's be absolutely clear about the facts of the case here. Now, nasaan na si Bat? Don't mention, na-distract ako eh. Binibuild ko yung momentum eh. Binibuild ko momentum. Ngayon, ayan na. Yung mga Team Suka. Hindi Suka. Team Suka. Ayan, Team Suka. Kamusta naman kayo dyan, mga Team Suka? Now, obviously, marami nag-react dito, including myself. Parang, okay? Parang, wow. Ano to? Diba? I mean, wow, ganda ng watch, no? Parang, okay, like, I saw the pink socks diplomacy, all right? BBM, in fairness naman to the guy, I mean, at least medyo, hindi katulad ni Digong na parang ano lang, di ba? Parang, yun nga nakakatawa eh, tinatawag na ano, eh, pero parang mas usapan, ano. Anyway, I'm trying to be polite as possible here. Okay, gets ko yung sa Naga, pumunta dyan, ganyan, okay. But the next thing you know, Leni's there with other mayors and all. And the next thing you know, ganito yung mga images na pinapost ng Malacanang. Na parang wait lang, nasaan na tayo? Medyo masyadong mabilis. Wait lang. Akala ko magkalaban tayo, di ba? Akala ko gano'n. So, syempre, gagamitin ng mga DDS ito. Sasabihin ng DDS, tignan niyo ng mga dilawan na to, mga pinklawan na yan. Una-una, tal na kayo. Kayo nga yung nagpabalik dito ng mga Marcoses. Ayusin niyo muna sarili niyo. Pangalawa, alam naman natin si Ma'am Leni, chami-chams talaga kahit sino nandiyan. Hindi ko sinabi ako nga, pero bakit? Wala namang problema sa akin. Mabait talaga yan si Ma'am Leni, okay? Mabait talaga si Ma'am. Kaya tingnan niyo nga yung, kahit nga ako nakipag-selfie and all with all of them, ang bait-bait nila. Mabait talaga siya si Ma'am Leni and all. But, obviously, ayan, nagiging Cynthia Villar na naman boses na, obviously, bakit? Bakit? Baba ba tayo? No, I mean, obviously, medyo cringe, di ba? Medyo cringe naman talaga, aminin natin, di ba? Medyo cringe talaga, parang, wait lang, parang, medyo mabilis, medyo hinahinay lang, di ba? Medyo cringe talaga. I mean, let's be honest, guys, come on. Let's be honest. Tapos yung mga ibang kaibigan pa natin nung nasa Naga si BBM, nakaganon kay President. Sabi, ayan na naman talaga tayo. Okay, I have nothing against civility. I have nothing against, our leaders trying to work it together. And absolutely, I agree with Ma'am Leni. You have to make it work. Nandito na nga tayo eh. Mayor na si Leni, President na, anong gagawin natin? Alam man, i-deny natin reality. Alam nga naman, wala tayong gagawin, di ba? But, so, cringy, yes, cringy. At ang politika talaga, cringy ang politika. You don't know who you're gonna meet. Your enemy yesterday is your friend, not one friend, and your enemy is your enemy. Your enemy of your enemy is still your enemy, or sometimes the enemy of your enemy is your ally or your And then, cringe talagang politics. Unfortunately, if you really want to make change, you want to get things going, it's an element of that. Kaya nga kailangan ng political courage, right? But yeah, medyo cringe. Is it cringe? Yeah, absolutely. Like, what's going on? Like, ano to? Like, medyo like, hinay lang, chill lang. Whoa, bro, yung mga ganun. Like, bro, slow lang. Chill lang tayo, right? Pare, open-minded lang tayo. Chill lang, bro, chill. Having said that, remember, progressive realist. Let's look at the numbers. Balikan natin. So, katulad ng pangako natin last time, gagawa na naman tayo ng mga maps. Salamat kay Ian. Salamat sa kaibigan natin sa WR Numero. Hopefully, Okta, shoutout Prof. Ranjit. Baka naman, ma-share din yung mga data para makagawa tayo ng mas maraming mga ganyan. Okay. So, what is this map? This map basically builds on our previous map. Our previous map was based on the numbers, thanks to Robin, Cleve, yung mga kaibigan natin dyan. At saka, of course, this is also part of our Team Pinas Foundation series of basically information raising, advocacy, etc. So salamat kay Ian for putting this together and the data. So we're gonna do more of this. So the previous one, guys, basically tinignan natin dyan, ano yung mga factional alignments. Sino sa ating mga kababayan ay nag-self-identify as pink? Sino nag-self-identify as solid north, loyalist, at sino nag-identify sarili as solid south or Maka-Duterte? Now, depending, of course, on the intensity of loyalty or sense of loyalty, all the way ba, soft supporter, mid supporter, all the way supporter, carton supporter, the colors will change. Mas intense, so you can see in the regions, Ilocos Norte, northernmost part of the country, talagang pulang-pula, di ba? Talagang red na red. Because these are areas where I have very strong identification with the Marcoses. And then you move to the south, and then you can see it gets greener and greener, which is the identification, of course, with Sara Green. But interestingly, you can see that in the center of the country, literally, Bicol region, parts of Visayas region, even part of southern Luzon, you see also not only pink, but hot pink. Hot pink, right? Talagang tunay na lalaki lang agad. So you could see the levels of intensity and all of that. So in the previous map, we had that. But what we're adding in these maps, in itong latest map is, as you notice, of course, first of all, not only you have 3 different colors, you actually have 4 colors, including swing states. So ito na, parang mala USA na tayo. Remember, sa US, swing states ang tinitignan talaga sa elections because may mga very blue states and very red states. So I don't know, maybe if you're from Louisiana, expected na Republican yung presidential ano mo. And then kung California, not always, but most likely Democrat ang voto mo, or New York, etc. So sa US, for instance, ang tinitignan nila yung swing states. Whether it's in the Rust Belts, it used to be Florida, because at some point Florida was more purple than red. Georgia, which was red, it became purple, almost blue, and then now siguro pabalik na naman sa purple, if not red. So you're looking at really battleground states, you're looking at swing states. Now, obviously, we're not exactly the same as the US. And alam mo yung mga nag-nitpick, yan ang pinaka-sign na mababang level ng ano. Obviously, we're not the same system. There's no electoral college. Obviously, the voting is different. But having said that, there's still a logic here. So if you look at it, dun sa previous so sa previous discussion natin, we look at the alignments. So if you're Sara Duterte, so see, this is solid, this is likely, this is leaning. So medyo soft, hardcore, mid. I hope it didn't sound wrong. Okay. You know what I mean, right? Okay, so ito yung mga siguro yung mga yung mga nagpapakain ng karton diyan sa deheg, mga tapos yung mga solid pink, siguro ito yung mga alam mo na, di ba? Yung konting ko lang kay Ma'am Leni, galit na kaagad sa akin kung ano sasabihin sa akin. Hindi, perfect siya. Wala tayong, bakit di ba? Tapos ito, mga pinsan ko yan. Shout out kay pinsan. O yan, insan. Ito, yung mga pinsan natin dyan na talagang, Marcos, the best, yung mga ganon. Golden era, Taliano, mga ganon, mga Yamashita Gold, yung mga ganon. Yan, yung mga ganon, mga Yamashita Gold. Tapos, yung isa naman, mga, bakit? Perfect naman si how dare you? Cloud chaser kay Darian, how dare you question? Ganun. Yan mga ganun, yung very solid. And then, ito na yung mga favorite natin talaga, mga, ayan, may daladalang karton dyan sa The Hague at saka, kay Tatay Digong. Anyway, okay. Right. So, if you look at this, if there were elections today and each side fielded a candidate, right? Basically, it will be a race between Sara Duterte and undecided, right? So the 2 biggest factions are DDS and non-affiliated people. Basically, yung parang, so ang laki na tong 30% na to, guys. This is huge, right? So basically, almost 1/3 ng ating voters ay neither DDS, not even soft DDS, but not also necessarily pink, not also loyalist. So up for grabs tong 30%. So this is analogous to, let's call it, perfect purple states. Again, obviously very different system. So if you're Sara Duterte, of course you'll feel very good about it. And then obviously we know that may pagka aerodynamics ng politics, you can use the strong base to further mobilize, etc., etc. Okay. Now, obviously, if you're solid here, hindi ka na pupunta dito, right? But if you're soft voter here, maybe if a lot of people defect from this side to one of them, maybe they'll also defect. So actually, if you look at the swing votes, it's not only this undecided, it could be also some of these soft supporters here, right? Right. It could be soft. So actually, in theory, you can imagine Sara Duterte, for instance, assuming Sara Duterte runs, already can count on around 30 to 40%, gets, at some point, maybe magdi-defect pa yung mga ibang soft loyalists na ayaw dun sa candidate ng mga kabila or pipili ni Marcos or whatever, baka magdi-DS pa sila or baka hindi na sila or Sara could also get at least half of this 30%. Next thing you know, she can become a majority-based president, the second majority-based president since Marcos. Now, is that for sure? Of course not. Is that a probable scenario? Because we know maraming bandwagoning effects of politics, right? If you have very strong momentum, strong base, magkakaroon ng bandwagoning at the level of politicians, at the level of command vote, but also at the level of herd mentality, right? Marami tayong nakausap ng mga kaibigan over the years. Bakit mo bubutoy yan? Parang gusto ng lahat eh. Yung gano'n. Naalala ko yung panahon pa ni Digong yung tumakbo. Parang yan ang sikat ngayon eh. Parang yan ang gusto ng tao. Parang, hindi, pero anong gusto mo? Hindi, yun ang gusto ng tao eh. Di ba? Yun ang kikiuso. Di ba? Yun ang tinatawag na herd mentality. There's proven, there's a whole literature in psychology about that, right? So if you're Sara Duterte, you're not only counting on this, you can potentially also get some of this, if not even some of this here, right? Now, I don't know, but maybe in an impossible, crazy situation, let's say Lenny doesn't run, and then whoever runs, ayaw din ng mga pinks, baka yung mga soft pink, baka mas never mind, I won't go that far. But anyway, you can get the logic here, right? So what you see in this map, guys, is intensity of support, but you also have an idea of sino mga soft pink, soft loyalist, medyo soft na DDS. So for instance, you see some certain regions in Eastern Visayas, for instance, not necessarily super solid. They're not so solid part of solid South, right? In the same way na NCR and some part are not so solid part of solid North. And then here you can really see the power of Lenny here in and the pink. And by the way, pwede natin ilatag yung 2025 vote for Bam Aquino and Kiko, and you'll also see there in Bam Aquino and Kiko, there's a huge level of overlap with this. In fact, Bam and Kiko did very well in this corridor, and that secured, at least in the case of Bam, around 20 million votes, right? So anyway, as I said, of course, iba rin ang Senate race because in Senate race, 12 ang pwede mong pipiliin. So, pwede medyo magbalimbingbing ka, magpakit-pakit ka, magpa-safe ka. You can get vote across kurut-kurut-kurut here, tapos boom, solid here. So, most likely in the case of Bam, he already got strong here, and then nagkurut-kurut siya here, nagkurut-kurut siya, wala naman siyang sinabi against Sara, wala naman siyang sinabi, safe, kurut-kurut-kurut, put together, boom, may 20 million ka na. But you can only do that if you're running for Senate kasi 12 yung options, so may mga DDS na medyo soft, sige na nga, pwede na si Bam Kiko. May mga loyalists na soft, sige na nga, pwede na Aquino. And then kay Kiko siguro wala masyadong problema kasi may Sharon effect. But anyway, so you get the logic here, right? So when you do analysis, you look at this. You just don't say, ay, ganito, ganyan. No, you look at the data, you look at the intensity, you look at the spectrum, you look at the possibilities. But for me, what makes this interesting? Obviously, cringe ng konti, but at the same time, progressive realist, diba? Look at this. Pag sinama mo yung solid dito at solid dito, you already have, may pangtapat ka na dito. Right? Moreover, meron kang mga parang swing states, di ba? Meron kang gray areas dito. Meron kang gray areas dito. And dito, talagang magiging ano yan. This will be a full campaign. Air war, ground war, social media war. And for that, you need resources. For that, you need momentum. Right? For that, you need the right kind of candidates. And pag sinasabi natin na right kind of candidate, it's not necessarily just the presidential, but it's also the vice presidential candidate. It's also what kind of ground game do you have, right? It's also, kaya mo ba? Can you speak different languages in this part of the world, in this part of the Philippines, diba? Alam natin, for instance, one of the reasons why this is very interesting. Let me take that out. Hindi pa nag-reply si Ma'am Risa, baka tampo siya sa akin kasi Lenny ako ng Lenny. Anyway, no, so there's a map showing kay Risa how she developed very significantly over time. Just to be clear, this is not like saying Lenny should run. I'm just saying pink. When I say pink, oh, isa pa yan ha. When I say pink, it could be any of these candidates. Bam could count on that. Lenny could count on that. If Lenny and Bam don't run for that, I think Risa can also get a lot of that, right? I know there are also many loyalists who are open to supporting Risa. Obviously, medyo sa DDS mahirapan siya. But I'm trying to bring out this dito sa internet natin. So actually, you can see in the case of Riza, hindi masyadong pinag-aralan. But Riza is a very successful case of national campaigning. Ilang beses siya tumakbo, and every time significant nag-improve yung numbers niya and she built up, or she was able to maintain enough position and enough momentum para makuha niya yung magic number para makapasok siya sa top 12. At isa sa mga bagay na hindi masyadong pinag-usapan, pero nalaman natin yan based on mga research, kinausap natin mga campaign managers, experts. Actually, Risa, isa sa mga dahilan na very successful siya is Risa Ontiveros was able to run vernacular campaigns. So either this is commercials in vernacular, maybe Waray, maybe Bisaya, maybe Ilonggo, different language, but also working with influencers, with thought leaders, with community leaders, civil society leaders, different parts. Diba? So I think the Riza Ontiveros campaign, successful campaign over time, including at the height of Duterte power. So when Duterte won in 2016, nanalo rin si Riza sa Senate. 2022, nung umalis na si Digong, pumasok si Sara Marcos, nanalo pa rin si Riza. So Riza was able to be very successful in under the most difficult conditions, despite all of the fake news and attack and kabastusan and everything like that. So actually, Riza Ontiveros campaign could give us some idea about how to win over some of the swing states. Whether Riza is the standard bearer or Riza is the vice presidential, or maybe you're not part of the equation. So here, interesting yan. Ground war, social media war, command vote war, and also variegated communication strategy war. Dito kailangan mo yan. So, that is why, guys, yes, you can say this is cringe. And then you look at this map and say, you know what's worse than cringe? Worse than cringe is tiki toki toki tiki. Worse than cringe is makabalik yung mga worst ever political dynasty in Malacanang. So bad that even worse than Marcos's, right? So hindi katulad ng mga Team Suka na kaibigan natin, we never had illusions about the Marcos's, right? But we give credit where credit due. At least inamin niya may corruption, may problema. At least hindi duwag, hindi tuta sa West Philippine Sea. At least okay, there are a couple of at hindi bastos at mamamatay tao na en masse katulad ng isang karton. Anyway, so yeah, cringe, yeah, coalition politics could work, yeah. Having said that, guys, I'll try to still bring out the Riza Ontiveros one. Hindi ko alam ba't hindi gumagana tong internet dito. Having said that, guys, sinasabotage ako nito. Ang nakita ko marami nag-react dyan na, uy, ano yun, si Richard, in-endorse mo. So, nakalimutan mo na si ano, di ba, ganyan. Oh, yan naman, lalo na yung team Suka na yan. Ang kakapal ng mukha. Actually, the leverage in 2028 will be with the pinks. If you look at it in theory, actually, the weakest of all the four different groups, not necessarily numbers, because statistically tied almost with Solid North and Loyalist, but the weakest are the pinks, actually, because in terms of resources, money, troll farms, foreign backing, alam naman natin na